Welcome to the Chess Angle. This is not your typical chess podcast. If you're an amateur or club-level player, the Chess Angle is for you. Our content is aimed at busy adults who are serious about the game but have limited study time. Featured guests include both amateur and titled players alike. And now, here's your host, Director of the Long Island Chess Club, Neil Bellon.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in. Weather is beautiful here in New York. It's like low 60s, like 60, 61, that nice sort of fall sweatshirt weather. Anyway, beautiful day. So I show up to the club this week and we meet at night during the week. The game starts at 7:30. So I like to get there like around 6:45, give or take, just to kind of set up and get everything ready and just so I'm not rushing. But what happens is, as I'm driving down the block to the parking lot, I see all these kids lined up in costumes and parents, and the entire parking lot has all these little stations with like candy and decorations and stuff. And I'm like, what is going on? So it turns out there's a daycare that uses the church during the day, and they're having this safe Halloween festivity. And what that is, I don't know if they do this in other parts of the world, but I guess here in the States, I know in New York and on Long Island, it's a big thing. They have these safe Halloween things where the idea is that it's at a location like a school or a church or a hall, something like that. And the idea is that it's supervised, there's other parents around, and it's quote unquote safer than going trick-or-treating to strangers where you don't know what they're going to give you. And I think that's one of the reasons why, just as a side note, I get fewer and fewer trick-or-treaters each year because these safe Halloween programs, at least on Long Island, are so popular that nobody goes trick-or-treating because it's like, oh, well, we went to the safe Halloween instead. And I guess with younger kids, that's what they're doing. I just remember growing up in the 80s on Long Island, on Halloween, the streets were like packed. I mean, you know, you'd go for hours. The doorbell would be constantly ringing. You'd go through candy. It was like a thing. It was a big thing. Now, I don't know if other people deal with this. I'm lucky if I get maybe 7 or 8 groups of trick-or-treaters. I mean, we won't even go through one bag of candy sometimes. And of course, Halloween is not happening yet. It's not till the 31st. We all know that. But these safe Halloween things generally take place earlier. Like they usually do it another time during the month of October before Halloween. So that's why they had it. But anyway, the daycare never notified us about this. Like we have a text thread for all of the groups that use the church. And if there's something that needs to be communicated, it usually goes on there, but they didn't do it. So I was kind of upset. So I show up and I'm like, all right, what do I do here? Because I have seniors coming. I have players over 80 years old. They're driving. They're not going to park like 3 blocks away and walk. I don't even want to do that. I could barely get down the road. So I said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I spoke to one of the dads and he's like, yeah, it's this safe Halloween. I go, you know, we rent the church out. Like, what's the deal? He goes, we're out of here at 7:30. So he goes, you know, we have the parking lot rather rented till like 7:30. I'm like, okay. Now, meanwhile, I mean, I have the church booked, I think from 7, but it's what it is. So I decide basically I run home because it's not far from my house. I get on the computer. I basically post on our website that we're starting at 8. I texted everybody and emailed everybody from the tournament because I have contact information for most of the players. And it worked out. I told everybody we're pushing back to 8. Everybody was really cool. We still held the round, without a problem. It was round 2 and it went well. But these things happen when you run a club. So an unexpected safe Halloween activity for the kids. I mean, they were cute, but it was just kind of annoying that we had to throw our plans back or we had to change our plans and that I wasn't notified. But as such, when you're running a local chess club where you're renting public space. So that was an interesting setback. I also want to talk about my game this past week. Very interesting, very, very instructive because the way my opponent, was playing, he made 2 mistakes that are very, very common, and players who have trouble boosting their rating or they complain that they can't get better, these are 2 mistakes that they commit all the time, and this was a textbook example, so I want to share it. So My opponent is rated about 1430, something like that, 1425. So decent tournament player. He's actually beaten higher rated players before, but I know that he's been stuck in that 1400 range for some time. He might have snuck over 1500, but that was short lived, but he's kind of stuck there. And here are the two things that he did. So I offered a few trades at times just because I felt that was the right move. Again, I'm oversimplifying. I don't want to discuss specific moves, but usually if your opponent has a very active piece and your counterpart is inactive, it's always a good idea to trade. So he had this very active fiend kettled light squared bishop. So I moved my inactive light squared bishop to trade it. Good move. And rather than trade or maybe defend his bishop, I think taking was probably his best choice. He moves his bishop somewhere else, like on an inferior square, but it was almost like he did it because he knew I wanted to trade and he just didn't want to. It was almost like some anger thing, like some spite thing. Like, no, you want to trade? Well, I don't want to trade. And you have to understand, when your opponent offers a trade, sometimes taking it is actually the best move or it's perfectly fine. Hold that thought. So then that was one move. Then there was another instance where this happened with a knight. He doesn't do it and he moves his knight to another square that attacked my bishop. But the truth is, once I move my bishop, his pieces are worse and mine are better. You know, this comes from Jeremy Silman, right? He's always saying this. Don't make a one-move attack if your opponent can simply move it to safety and move it to maybe even a better square. And then the piece that you moved to attack it is actually on a worse square. So it was almost like he was playing this like spite anger thing. Like I wanted to trade and he was saying, well, no, I'm not going to do that. But he didn't realize that by not trading, he was making his position worse. And I don't know where that came from. Now, usually with amateur players, it's usually the opposite. Usually they want to trade everything, right? They don't like any kind of peace tension. So if someone offers a trade, they just automatically do it. Or if they're not sure what to do, I'm going to trade a piece. It's like this thoughtless trading just because you can, especially with pawn tension. Like a lot of players don't like pawns facing each other diagonally and they'll just trade it. But he was doing the other end. It was almost like an overcorrection. He was refusing to trade, but to the point where it didn't make sense. Like he thought, I don't know, like he was going to get under my skin by not trading, but my position just kept getting better. That's a major, major leak in his game. And the second mistake he made, and this is sort of an offshoot of what I just said because I had the better position, there was one point where I'm threatening to win an exchange. He couldn't get out of it. It's a forced win of an exchange. And he just could not concede that was going to happen. So the mistake that players make is when they're going to lose material, they don't concede, they don't realize, they don't accept that they can't get out of it. And the thinking should be, okay, I know I'm going to lose an exchange. What's the best way to deal with it? Like, how do I recapture? Like, what do I do? Do I, move something else to capture the bishop after he goes bishop takes rook? You have to kind of look at that. Okay, he's going to win an exchange. How can I best deal with this? And just accept that you're not going to get out of it. But what they do is they try to force some fancy tactic or in-between move rather than concede they're going to lose material. And then their position gets even worse. So he tried to get too fancy where I attacked his queen. Then he did this like in-between bishop move where he attacked my queen, but he ended up losing a rook. Because I go bishop takes queen, he takes bishop takes queen, but then I go bishop takes rook. And remember, after he took my queen, so his bishop is being attacked by my pawn and he has to recapture because I took the rook and he can't do both. He's either going to lose a piece, a bishop in this case, or the rook. He actually did the worst possible thing he could. And long story short, I end up winning a rook when all he had to do was just accept the loss of the exchange. Now I'm still winning there, but he has some play. Like it's a playable position. He's worse, but it's playable. The queen is still on the board. He can still shake things up. I could easily have made a mistake, but he just made it worse. Like he couldn't accept that he was going to lose that material. And a lot of players do that. They get so frustrated that they're going to lose material that they desperately try to wiggle out of it. And then the move that they make to try to wiggle out of it because they just can't accept the loss of material, it makes it worse. To review, those are two major leaks. The first is when you refuse to trade just out of spite or because you think it's the right thing to do. Sometimes just trading is okay. That actually is the best move. And the second thing, when you're about to lose material and you can't get out of it, you have to accept that and just find the best course of action to deal with it rather than play some awful move that you think is defending against it, but is actually a blunder. Like, you just have to concede that, okay, there's nothing I can do to prevent this loss of material, and anything I do to try to prevent it is not going to work, and I'm going to lose even more material. That was the mistake he made. This is so common. I see this all the time. I see this every week where they're about to lose material and they can't handle that and they make it worse. He should have just accepted the loss of an exchange and it still would have been a game. It's not like the game would have won itself. I still need to play chess. I still could have made a mistake. Queens are still on the board, that type of thing. Very, very instructive game. That might be good for a game analysis episode. And one more thing I'll say about this, because this has come up before. Let's talk about tactics. For your over-the-board tournament games, virtually all of your tactical shots will be basic 1 to 3 move sequences. It's not going to be these like fancy, ultra hard, like 5 to 6, 7 move, wild combinations. You're actually better off studying basic thematic tactical puzzles, even as an advanced player, because that's what you're going to use. Those advanced puzzles, they're not going to come up. And if the position does call for one of those sort of advanced tactical shots, it's going to be so difficult to figure out in that time control that you're better off not even bother doing it because you're just going to mess it up and throw the game away, because usually those are very, very difficult to spot. Now, remember, most tactical moves in over-the-board games, they're going to come from your opponent being a weaker player, they're going to blunder in time pressure, or it's going to be the final stage of a positional advantage, because usually if you're putting the squeeze on your opponent and you have a better position, right, you're positionally better, that usually leads to a tactical shot. But most of the time, again, it's going to be just very, very basic. Pins, forks, skewers, removal of the guard, overloaded piece, back rank mate, things like that. And that's why it's good at all levels. Just study those basic tactical sequences. Because I know for most of my tactical shots, when those occur, even against very strong players, it's generally fairly obvious and basic because they simply blundered and made a mistake. It's usually not something that's going to be really, really difficult to find. And I just think that's so important. So rather than focus on these extremely difficult tactical problems that I'll argue have no practical value, just study basic tactical shots, maybe intermediate, that type of thing. The ultra hard ones, I just don't really think they're practical. Sure, do some for fun, do some for thinking, but the use of tactics in your over-the-board games is going to be much, much more straightforward, generally speaking. I see this every week, not only in my games, but in the games that I observe. So just some things there. Let's jump into the listener mailbag. Our first message is from Scott. He says, "Hi, Neil. As an adult improver who exclusively plays weekend tournaments and really enjoys them, I listened with interest to your episode on weekend tournaments. I felt compelled to weigh in with some of the more positive aspects, which for me anyway far outweigh the negatives, not in an attempt to argue with you at all, as your points were completely legitimate, but just to offer the other perspective." Well, Scott, I like that. Please disagree with me. I like that. I like when I say something and people have a different perspective. That's what makes the conversation interesting. That's what moves the needle forward. For those of you who didn't catch that, I was basically, I don't want to say bashing, but I was criticizing weekend tournaments and many of the problems that are associated with them compared to club events. So Scott is basically saying that he enjoys the weekend events and there are some positives. So I'm curious to hear the other side of it. Again, Scott, thanks for chiming in. And here's what he said. So first he says, the vibe. Being immersed in a tournament environment fully for 2+ days, surrounded by chess players, is an enjoyable chess experience unlike anything else. Fair point, but for me, and I know for many others, maybe it's my age, that's a lot. That's a lot to be mentally engaged in sort of one session. But I'm sure many people like you, they kind of feed off of that and enjoy that energy. So that's interesting. He says variety. I like playing new opponents all the time as opposed to a more local club environment. That's definitely true. If you don't want the same crew and you want to mix it up and get some new players, You'll definitely get that at a weekend tournament. No arguments there. And then he says, prizes. I think the big money prizes are a positive for a couple of reasons. First of all, as a man in my 40s, what else am I going to compete in that actually has significant stakes? It's a great opportunity. Not that it happens often, but when I get the chance to play in a final round weekend game where prizes are in the balance, that's pretty awesome. I'm going to have to respectfully disagree, Scott, but it's to each his own. Like many people are going to agree with you. For me, you talk about stakes, the stakes of rating and the stakes of just enjoying the game and the thrill of winning, maybe winning a physical prize like a book or a trophy. That's enough stakes for me, but many people agree with you. So I guess it's personal preference. I personally think the big money prizes are more of a problem than a positive. Maybe I'm in the minority. I don't know. That's just my own take, but I totally get your point of view. And then he says, competition. You mentioned that the prizes would attract bad actors, such as sandbaggers. Most of these tournaments do have anti-sandbagging measures. Not that such things are 100% foolproof, but in my many years of playing weekenders, it's a minor occurrence at the most. The main effect I see from the prizes is the attraction of very ambitious players, some local, some traveling from long distances, who are going all out to win. The competition is incredibly tough, and to me, chess is all about challenging yourself. Steel sharpens steel, as they say, and I'm certain I'm a much stronger player as a result of this type of competition. Well, that's definitely true about the competition. They are competitive. There's a lot of real hardcore players at these weekend events. So if that's what you want to face, you're certainly correct. And I'm glad that, you're not seeing a lot of sandbagging. I haven't played in one of these tournaments in years, so I won't speak to that as far as recent times. I know in the past that was definitely an issue. And then he says, yours is my favorite chess podcast. Keep it rolling, Scott. Well, thanks, Scott, for the kind words. I appreciate it. And again, I really do appreciate you sharing your point of view. I'm sure many agree with you. And this sort of debate is, of course, what keeps it interesting and what makes the world go around. So thanks so much. We're going to take a short break and we'll be back in just a moment. And now back to the show. Our next message or comment really is from our YouTube channel. Of course, most of you are listening on Spotify or a podcast app. That's really where our major numbers are. This is really an audio-only podcast. But if you do want to check out our YouTube channel, we have a decent number of subscribers, not too many. We probably have about 1,500 subscribers. I generally get less than 1,000 views per video, and we don't really do well with the algorithm. So check out our YouTube channel. How's that for a plug, huh? No, it's all good because it's really more of an audio thing on Spotify. And because I have a still image on YouTube, it's kind of just an audio, just an image. It's the algorithm's not going to like it because it's not really a video. I just put it on there more for like search and publicity. But so if you want to check out our YouTube channel that the algorithm hates, go check it out. But anyway, all kidding aside. So on YouTube, this is from @Nemtomi is the screen name. He says, okay, so this morning I listened through and would like to address some of your thoughts. Chess in Europe is indeed a blessing. Here in Hungary, I go to 3 9-round tournaments a year, no 2-round days. I also work part-time and have 2 small kids. It is indeed doable. You just really need to want it. The games usually start around 3 p.m. and last till around 7 or 8 p.m., so plenty of time for dinner afterwards. The kids thing I have to say I don't really get. What if a bunch of kids discover your club and start going regularly? Players need to get used to playing kids. I also don't experience this phenomenon you mentioned about tournaments and bratty kids. Maybe it's a U.S. thing. I go to tournaments in Hungary, Croatia, Austria, and Transylvania. Well, let me stop there. Maybe it is a U.S. thing, but I hear a lot of negative things about kids at some of these tournaments. I personally don't have a problem playing kids. I'm fine with it. I know some of them can get a little fidgety and they have mannerisms that can be annoying. This is just kind of what other people tell me. Now, when you say about kids discovering the club and going regularly, believe it or not, I mean, yeah, of course, I love when people of all ages come to the club, but the ones who build a membership, believe it or not, it's actually not the kids. It's ones who start coming to the club as adults, at least for the Long Island Chess Club. Because the thing is with kids, they get distracted with other things. Their sports, some of them go off to college, they have other interests, and then they kind of veer away from chess. And, you'd be surprised. Of course, you're going to have some that stick with it all the way through. But even if they go on to be strong players, like I said, a lot of them end up moving away. They go to college, they move out of state, they get a job somewhere else in the country. Or some of these kids get so strong that they don't want to play at the club anymore, which is understandable. So if they're breaking 2,000, their thinking is, all right, do I really want to play at a club where most of the players are rated, let's say, below 1,600? So I know it sounds counterintuitive, but in my experience, recruiting kids to the club, it doesn't really build up the membership. Most of my regulars, when they started as adults. So it's kind of an interesting phenomenon there. He continues. He says about the time control and that it's quote unquote not normal for people to play for 5 or 6 hours. Why not? Like anything else, you get used to it. I snagged a half point against an older, like 20 years older than you, dude, because I dragged it out and didn't give up. Eventually, he slipped up. He was rated over 200 points higher than me. It happens. That's true, but I just think, just my opinion, for the weekend tournaments in the U.S. where it's more than one game a day, I really think they need to lower the time controls because, to play for 5 or 6 hours for one game, I do think that's a lot. Anyhow, he says, good luck. I am 1666 FIDE, but I had a performance rating over 1900 last time I went to a tournament last month. I'm 34 years old. Well, great. Very interesting. Thanks for the comment, and I appreciate you sharing, that juxtaposition between chess in Europe versus here in the States. Our final message this week is from Marty. This is a comment. He says, hi, Neil. I wanted to write in and provide a thought about tactics training methods such as the woodpecker method. An important part of chess training, in my view, is sensing the ebb and flow of the game and knowing when to take more time on a move and when a move can be made more quickly. I believe that many of my mistakes come from misjudging the criticality of the position and sensing how the game is changing over many moves. This is a topic that Jonathan Rowson addresses in his book, The 7 Deadly Chess Sins. This is definitely an area of the game that can suffer from spending too much time on tactics. To help with this, there is an exercise I do that I recommend for folks who don't have much time. I select a tactics problem and play the position against the computer. I give the computer 1 minute with no increment and set the strength to the highest level, which is around 2,800. I give myself unlimited time so that the focus is on correct play without worrying about time pressure. I play the position repeatedly until I am able to win consistently. For example, I set up a tactics position from the late middle game, implement a tactic to win a minor piece where the computer gets little or no compensation for the piece. I should be able to win even with the computer at the highest level. This exercise helps with tactics, strategic planning, endgame play, and sensing the flow of the game. Well, thanks, Marty, for sharing that. Very interesting. I appreciate it. Maybe some people can benefit that. I'm also going to be mentioning the 7 Deadly Chess Sins as well a little bit later in the episode. All right, so our main content this week might be interpreted as a hot take, but I truly feel this way. I want to discuss one of the most overblown pieces of advice for over-the-board club tournaments. It might even be dangerous. And it's the quote by the great Emanuel Lasker. When you see a good move, look for a better one. That is absolutely awful advice in this day and age as far as club level amateur tournaments. And that might seem a little ridiculous, me criticizing that. Bear with me. I'm going to kind of parse my answer and explain why I feel that way. What I did to prepare for this, I was thinking I can't be the only one who kind of thinks this way. So I kind of looked it up online and other people do agree with me. In fact, there's a chess.com blog post called When You See a Good Move, Look for a Better One, where he kind of argues a lot of the same points I'm making today. I'll link that up if you want to check it out. This topic of discussion, criticizing that quote by Lasker, it was inspired by an incident at the Long Island Chess Club. So we had a young, very talented player. He was playing one of our older regulars, like my age, maybe 1800 player, and this young player, okay, all he had to do was queen his pawn first. So basically, they have pawns racing to queen. His opponent queens first, then he queens, I'm saying it backwards, I'm sorry. He queens, then his opponent queens, but his opponent's king was right there, his bishop was there. All he had to do was give a forced checkmate. All right, so that's basically what it was. And I'm watching this. Now, of course, when you're watching a game, we're all grandmasters, right? When it's not your game, you're not the one sitting there with people watching, sweating it out, the clock is ticking. It's always easy, right? It's always easy to know the right move when it's someone else's game. So let's keep that in mind. But that being said, just watching this, it seemed pretty straightforward because he basically moves his queen with check, his bishop is there, and it's like a forced mating net. It wasn't too hard to see. But instead, I couldn't believe it. He played this, I guess they call it an intermezzo, an in-between move. And I don't know, maybe he was doing too many tactical puzzles that week. But anyway, it didn't work and he ended up losing the game. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. It seems so straightforward because instead of checking with his queen, he did something. It was like this. He like checked his opponent's king with like another piece or so. I don't even know because it happened so fast because there was also a time pressure thing. But after the game, I mean, I'm usually not the type to like bother the person after the game, but I'm like, how come you just didn't like check him with your queen and mate? And he's like, well, you know what they say, when you see a good move, very, very instructive there. That's what we call fancy move syndrome or too much French pastry. That's an old basketball term where you just try to get too fancy. Adequate moves are quite effective. And it would have been more than an adequate move, would have been just to check with his queen and to mate the guy. I don't know what he saw. I mean, again, this happens where your mind sort of plays tricks on you when you overthink things. And that's basically what happened. Just if you see a good move, play it. To be fair, getting back to the quote, when you see a good move, look for a better one. To be fair to Lasker, that quote was made in the context of old school, very slow classical time controls where players could take like 20 minutes on a move or something. So I'm not criticizing Lasker or the quote itself. I'm criticizing the fact that people still apply that and have that philosophy in these modern club games with club time controls. What I'm just saying is that it's really not applicable in many situations. So many people still cite that quote, but again, it just really doesn't apply to the club scene because of the faster time controls and the weaker skill level of amateurs compared to title players. And I want to make 4 specific points. First, this type of thinking, right? When you see a good move, look for a better one. It can get you into a situation where you might correctly spot the first move of a tricky tactical sequence or a combination, but then you get yourself into an only move situation where maybe you sack a piece or maybe it's a very aggressive move, but now you're in a situation where because you open this can of worms, you now have to find the correct move every time. So in other words, with these only move situations, because you started this correct but very aggressive and tricky sequence, if you don't find the correct continuation on every move now, you're losing. So basically, every move you make, you only have one correct move now because you decided to go into this difficult combination where you couldn't see past the first move. And you're like, I'll figure it out. Do you really have the chops to play that way? This is something that cost me a lot of rating points when I was younger. And then when I realized this was an issue, I gained a lot of rating points. Don't go into these tricky combinations where you don't quite see it through just because you find the first move, which happens to be correct. Because as I said, if every move from then on is only one move that's correct or you're going to lose, you're going to be in trouble. And it's like I said, do you really have the skills to play that way? And if you take this when you see a good move, look for a better one thing too seriously, that can happen. You can get into trouble. Second thing, if you obsess and constantly look for the perfect move every time, you are going to get into time pressure and you'll just blunder the game away. You may have a winning position, but you need the time to win it. So that's why the quote should be, when you see a good move, play it. When you see a good move, play it. Play the move. Number 3, Lasker's quote can lead to the sin of perfectionism. We kind of just spoke about that a little bit. That's a major issue for players of all levels, right? We're all trying to rid ourselves of that sin of perfectionism, but the whole idea of when you see a good move, look for a better one, that sort of encourages perfectionism. Now, we've mentioned a number of times The Seven Deadly Chess Sins by Jonathan Rowson. If you haven't checked that out, the price of that book is worth it just for the chapter on perfectionism. Literally. I'm going to read from the first page of that chapter, okay? This is, again, The Seven Deadly Chess Sins. It is an essential book for chess psychology. I wouldn't get it if you're kind of a beginner or you're an advanced beginner. The first chess psychology book should be Chess for Tigers. That's the one you want, by Simon Webb. I almost blanked on the name. As you get a little more advanced, then move on to The Seven Deadly Chess Sins. And here's what he says. Perfectionism manifests itself as the desire to find the best move on each and every occasion, but it is more than this in its essential character. The perfectionist looks to an ideal, a model of perfection, and then tries to play in a way that resembles such a model. Perfectionists thus strive to play chess not as the chess player they are, but as the chess player that they assume themselves to be when they are most perfect. That's a fascinating quote. I'm going to read one more paragraph here, and he says, this is in the introduction to this section, I will focus on three faces of perfectionism: moralizing, punishing the opponent; copycat crime, trying to emulate another player; and jam lust, asking too much of your position. Only then will we be in a good position to look more closely at time trouble and the related problem of indecision. My central claim in this chapter is that perfectionism results primarily from lack of confidence, and that most perfectionists are players who don't feel at ease with their current playing strength. And then one more sentence, he says, this desire to punish is very corrosive and leads you to see all sorts of problems and solutions that aren't there. This is fascinating. I mean, Seven Deadly Chess Sins, that's kind of a book, like you could almost reread that like every couple of years or so. And the fourth point I want to make here is that adequate moves and what I call waiting moves are very effective at the amateur level. Now, when we say adequate moves and waiting moves, let's just understand what we mean. An adequate move is basically a move where you somehow know on some level it might not be the best move. It's not objectively the best move, but it's perfectly fine. It doesn't worsen your position. It doesn't open up any threats for your opponent. You didn't miss like some major opportunity, and it maintains the position. Like it's a perfectly acceptable move. That's what an adequate move is. But unfortunately, many books and courses and chess coaches, it's either, well, you find the best move in the position or you've failed. And it completely negates the fact that guess what? Guess what? If you played the second, third, fourth, in some cases, even the fifth or sixth best move, you're still okay. It's okay. Nothing's going to happen. Okay, like you put in the engine, oh, you missed this. Okay, so what? Those adequate moves are perfectly fine. Now, a waiting move is sort of a type of adequate move. A waiting move is in a position where it's either very stale, boring, or just tricky. In other words, you're just not sure what to do. Like, despite all your chess skill, all your studying, everything, there are going to be positions you're just not sure what to do. So a waiting move, it's sort of a nothing move. Like it's almost like you're like checking in poker. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's almost like, obviously in chess, you can't take a pass. When it's your turn to move, you have to move. You're compelled to move. But a waiting move is the closest thing to kind of taking a pass. You basically make some simple nothing move that doesn't change the nature of the position. And it's almost like you're saying, okay, I don't think either of us knows what we're doing. I'm not going to force things. I'm going to make this nothing move. I want to see if you're going to crack. And very often they will. Let the other guy try to be perfect and throw the game away. That was a major, major inflection point for my own improvement. In other words, once I realized that it's okay to play good enough moves, quote unquote, good enough moves, if I don't see the best line, my tournament results shot up. That was a major thing where, when I first started playing in tournaments, it was like 1,200, 1,300. And then I got to like 1,700, 1,800. almost 1900. Again, that's thinking about accepting that adequate moves are okay. You don't have to be perfect every move. Just don't blunder, right? Just don't blunder. These good enough moves are perfectly fine. I'm telling you, you're going to see your rating soar and your results soar. Because when you try to be perfect every move, when you try too hard, that's when the mistakes happen. So those are my thoughts. It's a great quote that Lasker said, but I really think that applies to long time controls and for players with a lot more experience, definitely titled players for sure. But for most of us at the amateur level who are playing at the club level or with some of these quicker controls, I mean, even on these weekend tournaments with longer time controls, it's more the fact that we're amateur players and that perfectionism it's just not going to work for us. It's going to end up backfiring. When you see a good move, look for a better one. It's just overblown because people can take that to a very literal degree. So this final segment coming up is going to be optional. This is a little bit of an update on the podcast and my own content creation pursuits. I haven't addressed this in a while. There were a couple of things I said I was going to do that didn't work out. So I'm going to say this. If you were just here for the strict chess improvement aspect of it, you can safely log off at this time, and we'll see you next week. I hope you win your next game. If you're interested in hearing my thoughts on my content creation pursuits and the state of the podcast, stick around. And now back to the show. All right, so a little update here. I kept this for the end, so if you're sticking around, that means you want to hear this. If you're not listening to this, it's like, yeah, that's great. I have no interest in it. So I'm comfortable talking about this because I know you're listening now because you want to listen. So a couple of things. I tried doing some video content creation. I had it in my head. It was just something that I needed to get out of my system. Sometimes in life, you just have to do that, even if you're not sure and you're a little ambiguous. Like I said, sometimes you just have to get it out of your system. So I took a bit of a long break this summer. And during that break, I was looking into posting instructional YouTube videos on YouTube. I mentioned I was going to have a separate Long Island Chess Club channel. That didn't work out. That channel does not exist. The only channel we have is the podcast channel, the Chess Angle Podcast YouTube channel. I do post things on there, but again, it's a still image. So that's more for like a search feature. Like people might find it on YouTube. Oh, Chess Angle Podcast. What's this? And then they'll end up signing up on Spotify. So basically, if people discover the podcast on YouTube, but then subscribe to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, something like that, well, then you know what? It's done its job. And of course, there are some people who will watch on YouTube, but it really is audio only. So most people, probably better than 90% of our audience, listens on a podcast app. But anyway, the video thing didn't work out, and a couple of reasons why. So number one, I severely, and I mean severely, underestimated the workload. I knew it was going to be work, but it's significantly more just the planning, the filming, the editing. It's a lot. The second thing is, and again, this isn't complaining at all. I'm just kind of sharing my thoughts here. It's kind of like we're sitting having coffee and just talking here. So YouTube is saturated. I mean, it is saturated, and chess YouTube especially, basically the ones who kind of got in early, let's say before the pandemic, they're completely controlling everything right now because they were a bit popular to begin with. And then because they were already established, they like surged. And the truth is, and this is not just chess, this is all subject areas, the titled players, they understandably, they're going to steal a lot of the audience on YouTube, and it makes sense. Are you going to listen to some amateur you never heard of or like a grandmaster or something? I mean, there's one grandmaster, I happen to like this person myself. He recently started a YouTube channel, and already, I mean, he's getting numbers that usually most people would take years to get. He just started his YouTube channel. I mean, he's getting like 6-figure views. He already has like a 6-figure subscriber count. But when you carry the GM title in front of your name, that's what's going to happen, understandably. And the other thing, YouTube is also algorithm based, which you know. And what happens is, I mean, let's keep it real here. I don't want to be one of these like blame the algorithm people, but the thing is, as a result, there's some residual effect from that because there are some okay chess channels, like they're passable. I know this is subjective, but there are some chess channels, I think they're okay. They're passable. They get a ton of views and subscribers. And there are some amazing chess channels that I think are phenomenal, and they're like criminally underrated, and they get very limited views and subscribers. I mean, it's quite fascinating from like, I guess, a sociological aspect, or I don't know what the word is, but it's just, I don't get it. I don't know. So anyhow, I'm all in on the podcast as far as content creation. And I realized I have no choice. I have to choose one content creation pursuit because that's all I can realistically handle right now while still enjoying it and running the club and with my other responsibilities. And it's really working out. I'm happy. But like I said, I feel good that I got that out of my system because you might say, well, don't you feel like you wasted all that time? No. I was listening to something the other day where he says, if you spend time doing something, but it doesn't work out, that actually is productive because now it's not going to work out. Like you did it, you got it out of your system. You don't have to wonder like, should I have? So I thought that was productive. And, it's great. I also do teach privately, just a few students. I'm looking to expand that when I'm ready, which is not right now. But barring any unforeseen life circumstances, I do plan on doing this podcast for many years to come. I mean, all things come to an end, but hopefully that will be many, many years down the road. And as long as I'm enjoying it, I mean, the golden rule of podcasting or really any creative pursuit is that you stop when it's not fun anymore. So when it feels like a chore or an obligation, like you're walking in mud, like, why am I doing this? If it's just, then I'll stop. Because trust me, I'm too old for this. If I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't be doing it, but I'm really, really enjoying it. So that's the plan anyway. I never like to speak in absolutes. I don't really see this going anywhere. We're doing well. I'm enjoying it. And part of the reason I take the breaks that I do, because I know like there are some podcasts, I'm speaking podcasts in general, not necessarily chess podcasts, but I know there's a lot of podcasts out there where it seems like it's week after week, all year round, they never take a break. Like to me, like that's weird. To me, that's weird because I think breaks are good. That's what keeps you fresh long-term. It's what keeps things interesting. If I insisted on releasing 52 episodes a year, the quality would suffer. So that's just how my headspace is. I need the breaks, not just because life happens and to focus on other things, but just to clear my head and to come up with ideas for the show. And when you kind of step away from it, you sort of do a reset. It's healthy. That's what keeps me going long term. So if I just feel I need a break, if I'm feeling like it's a little too much, then that's what I do. And that's my new rule. And during these breaks, that's often where I think of some different ideas because it's a very different mindset when you don't have that responsibility to publish an episode each week. It sort of clears your mind to think of other ideas. And like I said, that's what kind of keeps it moving long term. So right now I'm recording this like mid-October. I'm guessing again, I don't want to speak in absolutes, probably around December, the holidays, I may take a few weeks off or more. We'll see how it goes. But we're in a good place now. I'm glad I just tried the video thing just to say I could do it. It's not for me. Okay, like many of you, I have a career, I have a day job, so I have to make my choices. And I like the way that is now because I'm doing something I love the game and I got the club, but I'm not overwhelmed to the point where I'm not enjoying it. So this is like just enough. So one content creation pursuit for me, that's the plan right now. Things are going well. Just wanted to share that. Appreciate you listening. Appreciate those of you who stuck around. And as always, I hope you win your next game. Have a great day, everybody.